A childhood given away. I used to think the smell of fresh cookies and the sound of birds in the backyard was what every kid grew up with. My earliest memories weren't of my parents, but of my grandparents. Their small-town home, the creaky floorboards, the quiet peace of our garden. That was my world. I was only a baby when my parents sent me to live with them, and I didn't know then that it wasn't normal. I didn't know I was being given away. To me, Grandma and Grandpa were Mom and Dad. Grandpa taught me how to grow tomatoes and chase butterflies without crushing them. Grandma had this soft voice that could hush even my nightmares. For 7 years, I thought I was exactly where I was meant to be. Then one day the visit started. Strangers who said they were my real parents. They brought a girl with them, my sister Laurel. She didn't want to play with me. She knocked over my toys and cried when I touched her hand. Our mother pulled her close like I was the one who had hurt her. I remember standing there, toys at my feet, wondering what I'd done wrong. Eventually they came to take me back. They said it was time I lived with my real family. I was excited, naive. I packed my little backpack and hugged my grandparents goodbye, thinking I was about to be welcomed home with open arms. But when I stepped through that front door, I didn't feel like a son coming home. I felt like a guest in a place I was never meant to stay. Chapter 2: The Spare Child. From the moment I arrived at my parents' house, I could feel it, the distance. Not just in how they spoke to me, but in the very walls around me. Laurel had her own room, painted in her favorite pastel colors, filled with toys, trophies, and glittering lights. I was given the storage room. A cold, cramped space barely big enough for a bed. No windows low enough to see out of. Just concrete walls and a flickering bulb overhead. They said Laurel needed privacy, as if I didn't. I tried to make it feel like home. I hung up a few drawings I had made with Grandpa, tried to add a splash of color with a blanket Grandma had knit. But Laurel complained the smell of paint gave her headaches. The drawings came down. The blanket disappeared one day while I was at school. No one said anything. No one had to. At school I did well. I always had. But when Laurel got a B+ on her math test, they took her out for ice cream and bought her a new backpack. When I brought home straight A's. Just a glance and a muttered, "Good job." Once my dad even said, "Well, of course you did well. You had a head start living with your grandparents." Like that made it mean less. I joined the debate team in middle school. It was the first thing that truly felt like mine. I made it to the state finals in my first year. I begged them to come. Practiced my speech 100 times hoping they'd be proud. But they never showed. They were at Laurel's dance recital instead. My grandparents came instead, clapping louder than anyone else in the auditorium. I smiled when they hugged me, but I scanned the crowd one last time, just in case my parents had made it. They hadn't. And that was when I stopped hoping. The golden child. By the time I was a teenager, the gap between Laurel and me had grown into a chasm. She was the sun our parents revolved around, and I was a shadow they barely noticed. When Laurel graduated high school, our parents threw a party that felt like a wedding. They rented out a community center, invited half the town, even hired a DJ. I watched her unwrap a set of car keys to a brand new red convertible, smiling like she was born to be celebrated. And maybe she was, at least in their eyes. 2 years later, when I graduated, there was no DJ. No rented venue. Just a quiet dinner at a chain restaurant and a watch in a plain white box. I remember sitting across from them, cutting into an overcooked steak while they scrolled through their phones. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and thanked them. College brought more of the same. Laurel got into an elite performing arts school. It cost more than they could afford, but they made it happen. Loans, savings, even borrowing from relatives. They called it an investment in her future. When I got accepted to a good state university with a scholarship, I was proud. I told them with a smile, hoping for something more than the usual shrug. But they just said I'd have to figure the rest out on my own. No offers of help. No pride in their voices. Just advice to take out more loans and tough it out. So I did. I worked nights, skipped meals, borrowed textbooks. And I graduated. With honors. No one from my family came to my ceremony. Just my grandparents sitting right in the front, holding a sign that said, "We knew you could do it." That day I finally understood. I wasn't their son. I was their obligation. Chapter 4: Blood Doesn't Make a Family. After college, I worked my way up in a tech startup, climbing slowly but steadily. I didn't need anyone's approval, I just needed results. And I got them. Promotions, praise, respect. Things I never had at home. That's also when Rachel came into my life. She had this way of listening, really listening, that made me feel seen for the first time. When she met my parents, she was stunned. I still remember how quiet she went in the car afterward. Eventually she just said, I don't understand how they can treat you like that. I didn't either. Rachel stood by me through every family holiday I left early, every passive-aggressive comment at the dinner table, every moment of silence when I'd talk about my achievements and get nothing in return. She was the one who told me I deserved better. The one who reminded me I wasn't imagining it. Then came the inheritance. My grandparents, those two people who had never once let me feel forgotten, sat me down and told me they were leaving everything to me. Not out of spite. Not as revenge. But because they had watched year after year how I was treated. Because they trusted me. Because they believed I would do right by them in their final years. I didn't cry in front of them. I nodded, thanked them, and tried to keep my voice steady. But later that night, I sat on the floor of our bedroom and broke down. Not because of the money, but because for the first time in my life someone in my family chose me. Then my parents found out. And suddenly the people who had barely tolerated me were calling nonstop. Accusing me of stealing. Of manipulation. Of tearing the family apart. That was the moment it hit me, harder than it ever had before. I had spent a lifetime trying to earn a place in a family that never wanted me to begin with. The confrontation. I invited them over, my parents. Not out of guilt, but because I needed to say things I'd never had the chance to say before. Rachel helped me prepare. I even wrote down what I wanted to get through just in case my voice failed me. When they arrived, the air was already thick with tension. My mother's eyes scanned my home like she was inspecting a hotel she didn't like. My father said nothing, barely meeting my gaze. They refused the drinks I offered, sat rigidly on the edge of the couch like they couldn't wait to leave. I started gently, telling them I wanted to have an honest conversation, not a fight. But within seconds my mother cut me off. She accused me of being selfish, ungrateful, even vengeful. She said they had sacrificed everything for me. That letting me live with my grandparents had been an act of love, not rejection. I asked them, calmly, why love looked so different between Laurel and me. Why I was always the afterthought. Why I had to scrape by while they handed everything to her without hesitation. My mother's face turned cold. Then she said something that shattered what little hope I had left. You were always more theirs than ours. It wasn't just a slip. She meant it. They hadn't sent me to live with my grandparents as a temporary measure. They had given me away. And when I came back, I was never their son again. Just a child in the way. That truth hit me like a punch to the chest. Years of confusion, of wondering why I always felt like an outsider, suddenly made sense. They hadn't failed to love me. They had chosen not to. Chapter 6, Chosen Family. After they left that night, slamming the door behind them, I sat in silence for a long time. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting the weight of everything settle. My mother's words rang over and over in my head. You were always more theirs than ours. And for once, I didn't argue with it. Because maybe, that was okay. I wasn't theirs. I was my grandparents' son. And when the texts came pouring in from Laurel, accusing, guilt-tripping, threatening, I didn't answer. Not because I was being cruel, but because I had nothing left to explain. No words would ever be enough for people who refused to hear me. When I visited my grandparents the next day, I told them everything. Every cruel word, every ignored plea, every ache I had kept hidden since I was 7. My grandmother cried softly, my grandfather just held my hand and said, "We knew. We've always known." They told me the truth, how my parents had nearly put me up for adoption. How they had begged to raise me instead. How they had hoped, foolishly,